We are now coming into our own as an administration. This budget is reflective of our top priorities with respect to people, housing, and public safety, in a very difficult economic climate. And so there was a lot that we wanted to look at that allowed us to take on the problems and the challenges head on, to address those, and at the same time give us the room to move, if you will, strategically in the areas that we really feel are extremely important for the well-being of our city. So I really do want to have Andy come up here. I am here to answer any and all questions on this as well, but I have a high regard for Andy Kawano, our Director of Fiscal Services, and his team, and so I think it's only deserving, after all the work that's gone into this, to have Andy up here. Andy.
Good morning, Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. Mayor is too kind. We all are benefiting from outstanding leadership at the City and County of Honolulu, and we thank Mayor Blangiardi, Managing Director Mike Formby, and Deputy Managing Director Krishna Jeriam. So we have a strong team. As Mayor alluded to, this is our second budget whereby our administration has put forth our priorities, in the budget in a responsible manner, as well as also listening to the public and understanding that people are struggling. As such, as a part of our budget, we have proposed to City Council a tax credit, a one-time tax credit of $300 per homeowner with the homeowners exemption. So that's approximately 151,750 homeowners with the homeowners exemption who will receive a $300 one-time tax credit. The commitment from the administration is $45.5 million, and that's reflected in our budget as essentially a reduction of our real property tax revenue. Real property taxes, as you know, is our main source of revenues for the City and County of Honolulu. We proudly propose it, and we hope that the council members support us in getting the tax credit to be a part of the mayor's budget bill for 2024, fiscal year 2024. Our budget reflects the mayor's priorities. We have an operating budget, as you all know, of $3.4 billion, an approximate 6.2% increase over last year. Our capital improvement program budget is at $1.1 billion on a rounded basis, roughly 6% higher than last year. We, in both budgets, focus on the affordable housing crisis, and we have, for the first time actually, we have a proposal for a broad-based capital improvements appropriation of $100 million to help fund the acquisition, development, the construction of more housing units on our island to, in conjunction with the state's program, increase our inventory of affordable housing. As you know, it's going to be really important to do that because we're in a situation now where the housing demand far exceeds what we have in inventory. And in terms of working with the state, we hope that we get on track to address the problem over the next several years. It's going to be a multi-year task, but I can tell you right now, our team is all in, and we're going to give that great focus. With regard to homelessness, the mayor's budget, as shared in the press release, includes $10.2 million for the continuation of the Housing First initiative, and $1.5 million for Hale Mauliola Housing Navigation Center, and a number of standard programs that we've covered through the Department of Consumer Services. With regard to public safety, we continue to invest in our police department, fire department, emergency services, and water safety departments. to improve service with regard to safety that we feel needs to be provided responsibly to the public. Our budget allocation for public safety is approximately $591 million, and we feel that the allocation of 17.3% of our budget to public safety is important and is going to be something that we continue to look at and emphasize going forward. With regard to public transportation, you know, the goal is to sometime this summer be in interim operation with rail, and as a result, we will look at our routing for bus routes and handy van service to ensure that people that take rail can get to their destination, because we're going to be going essentially from East Kapolei to the stadium, and we understand that there's going to have to be more service from the stadium to destinations for people that, you know, use the service. We've allocated $411 million to transit, and you know, we expect that it should greatly improve service going forward for fiscal year '24. And then lastly, you know, parks and recreation are important components of lives of people on Oʻahu, and we'll continue to invest in parks and recreations, not just from a CIP standpoint, but from an operating standpoint as well. And our director, Thielen, has gone through a reorganization such that she'll be able to take on through the operating branch things like court resurfacing, parking lot resurfacing, minor roofing repairs, and so on, so that you know, the parks can be maintained more effectively. We look forward to that in FY24 as well. Overall, you know, we still have large commitments we have to pay. There is debt service that makes up approximately 19.3% of our budget. And we have our benefits, employee benefits that we fund, and we've been fully funding even through the pandemic for retirement, for post-retirement health benefits, and then for as well as current health benefits, and we continue to do that. Our ERS plan or a share with the state and the other counties is funded at an amount close to 65%. So our accrued benefits are funded nearly 65%. And our OPEB for post-retirement health benefits is funded at 45%. And we've been told by our investment banking team that the 45% funding level for OPEB is very good to excellent. A lot of cities and municipalities have just started to fund their OPEB costs, and they have huge liabilities going forward. We're working on ours, and for both retirement and OPEB, we expect that you know, within 25 years, most of the liability will be funded, and it should further strengthen, you know, the city's balance sheet. I think I'll leave it at that. I have to say that where we are today financially is we're in a much better place than we were a year ago, and obviously 2 years ago during the pandemic, or just getting out of the pandemic. And I have to thank all of our, not just administration, but all of our valued employees that run the various agencies for being a part of a team and keeping focused and steadfast, and you know, working on priorities that support the mayor. With that, we'll take questions.
Andy, you said the increase is about 6%.
Oh, excuse me, for operating?
Yeah.
Or, yes, yes.
How much of that is, you know, how much does inflation play in that role? Is it almost flat? I mean, because 6%.
We're affected by inflation like everyone living on this island. You know, we're not totally electrified in terms of our vehicles. so we use gasoline. Gasoline drives inflation on this island in a large part. That increase is probably lower than the inflation rate on the island, and I believe that it further shows that we're being responsible and prudent in terms of our budget decisions to achieve our priorities.
How many people are eligible for the tax credit?
The estimate, and the estimate is based on our fiscal year 2023 assessment that we did. All of you that live here received your assessment notices December 15th. So based on that, it's about 151,750 houses with homeowners exemption. And, that number can change because, people may sell their home, or, they may decide to move, and they may actually change their property classification to, something like, for rental. And as a result, that number can change a little, but it's about 151,750. And if you multiply that times 300, that's where we get to the commitment of 45.5. Yeah, it's a one-time credit. So the credit will be deducted against the real property tax bills that start in July. Oh, sure, yeah. Yes. So one more tidbit of information to share. We're this $300 one-time exemption, I believe, is historic. I don't think the city has ever provided such a credit. There was a credit in 2006 based on my BFS team and their research, and I believe that credit was $200. But when you do the math, a tax credit of $300 equates to an additional one-time homeowners exemption of about $86,000. I'm rounding that up a little. So that's huge, homeowners under 65 receive an exemption of $100,000. Imagine for 1 year you have $186,000 in terms of an equivalent tax break. The other good part about it, and we've gone through a lot of discussion back and forth, the exemption was kept flat for all homeowners because we wanted to benefit the homeowners with the lower valued homes more than the folks that have the really high valued expensive homes. And from that standpoint, the folks that need more support will receive more in terms of the tax relief that they'll realize next year.
Of course, the properties have all gone up, does that mean they're actually still paying more? Will they be paying more this year still compared to last year?
Well, for this year, the tax bills that we've received was based on the FY22 assessment. So the tax bills go up next year. So the FY23 assessment will impact the bills that go out in July for August and in January for February, right, next year. So the tax amounts will go up generally unless council changes the tax rates. The tax rates are determined by council. In our proposed budget bill, we kept the tax rates flat. We didn't change any of them. And we look forward to discussion with city council, and we'll, at the time the operating bill gets adopted, we'll know what the tax bill will be.
If I could just add.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Manolo, to your question, so all of it's going to depend on what the assessment actually is. Okay, so what I loved about this concept and the strategic decision to keep it flat at 300 was it really spoke to equity, if you will, from the standpoint of people, as Andy alluded to or said, who are perhaps most in need, who perhaps maybe didn't even get an increase in their property of 86,000, or if they did, it was 100. Remember, this was a real aberration this year, that historically retail sales in real estate had not exceeded $10 billion. And on average, in past years, it's been about $7 billion. And this year, it came in at $12.4 billion. And that spiked everything. But, you know, based on neighborhoods and places where people are, that's not necessarily universal. A lot of the high-end properties really jumped. So this, to me, really spoke to listening to the people who were the most impacted by something they had no control over, and our efforts to try to make this as palatable as possible for them. But at the end of the day, if property values are appreciated, which they've always done here in Hawaii, invariably, your tax bill goes up somewhat. But, you know, so I think we try to keep this in a really good context. I'm really actually very proud of the work. A lot of thinking went into this to make it the most equitable. I'm sorry. Yes.
Salary increases for the executive staff on the city. I know the prosecutor has requested a salary increase.
For his deputy prosecutors, right? For the executive staff,
Anybody step
talking about the appointed staff, we've had no increases.
or managers
For manage, oh, so you mean civil service staff?
for the mayor's staff or?
Okay, so for the mayor's appointed staff, we're going to go in front of Salary Commission to discuss pay increases, but that's still up in the air. You know, there haven't been any pay increases for years. Yeah.
But if I can, Ian, that issue aside, which is really still up in the air, a lot.
You yourself requested some possible salary increases.
Yes, because our team, our people haven't had a raise in, I believe, more than 3 years, okay? But I would tell you that a large part of the increase in our operating was driven by the collective bargaining agreements, as far as probably $100 million is reflected in that, and then they take on top of that the compound effect of dealing with our OPEB, you know, retirement systems, and that actually eats up about almost $125 million of the $200 million increase. So, but I say it earlier, our focus is on our people, on housing, and on public safety. So, you know, we're working with that. And look, we've been on record too of saying, and in fact, I want to go back on the public safety part, because one of the things that we want to ensure, all of our first responders, is that we have provisions in there to not only give them the equipment they need, but really in the staffing levels as well. And we've allowed for that. So right now we have a vacancy in the police department of 394 police officers. That to me is an unacceptable number for this city and all that's going on here. And so, you know, we want to be sure that we're providing for that so that we can accommodate that with hopefully some successful recruiting and whatever. So, go ahead, Ian. Well, for police officers?
Police officers and the rest of the department.
Yeah, you know, I've been operating, yeah, Ian, I've been operating with that 3,000 number for some time on where we are. Let me just add some clarity to that. I think we've got about 8,700 full-time employees, FTEs. We employ another 1,500 under contract, okay? We were looking to, in our strategy, if you will, of developing our full-time workforce, of converting, if we could, about 1,000 of those 1,500. We're going to always need contract players. And then in addition to that, recruiting. So I would tell you, I'm going to hold off on until my State of the City address. We've made some good progress. In this difficult market to recruit in, we've made some really good progress, but we've got a ways to go, a considerable ways to go. But I'm pleased, maybe a little bit frustrated, but I'm pleased at how far we've been able to come. But really, it really has to do with the macro dynamics. I think anybody and everybody I've talked to will tell you out there, hiring right now is not easy. It's not. Rick? Andy?
Question for Andy. Andy, you mentioned the rail project. I'm assuming you're under the assumption that it's going to be operating at least in terms of service. What is, how much are you budgeting
For next year?
Operations in
So for operations and maintenance of rail, we're budgeting approximately $85 million next year.
And where is that going to come from? Is it going to come from other services? Because that's a new expense.
It's primarily funded by the general fund, yeah. And our total budget for transit is $411 million, so that would include bus and handy van as well.
Yeah, I want to add one thing to that too, Rick. You know, That's been budgeted in the past, only it never really came to be. This time, we're really certain that we're going to begin interim operations, so that's a real expense. You know, I think it's been in the past almost provisional with hope, but now we'll be announcing that very shortly on when we begin to actually begin operations, but we know we're going to be spending that money. Kristen?
It's pretty obvious that mass transportation is becoming a huge drain on the city's budget, both with rail and then I think we only have 13.6% fare recovery on the buses.
Mhm.
So, you know, very low usage of the buses. And I think that program is also very expensive.
Did you say low usage of the buses?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's about, your statistic said 13.6%, what you put out is fare box returns.
Hmm.
Oh, that's not usage.
That's not-
That's
that's not-
collection.
Collection, right.
Yeah,
right,
collection.
Right, right.
But we actually provide about 68 million rides a year on the bus.
Right, no, no,
Okay,
no.
so the ridership is, yeah.
But when you add 85 million plus, how much is the deficit on the buses?
Our funding of the bus operation is about $200 million. Most of it is general funded, but we also use highway funds for the bus operation.
You know, I don't know of a municipality, and maybe there are, but I don't know, we're dealing with Honolulu, that doesn't subsidize its public transit. You know, not unlike the airline industry, which nobody ever talks about, is heavily subsidized by the federal government, and so is the automotive industry. Heavily subsidized. So, you know, this is part of what you get for paying your taxes, and you live in a city. In this particular case, we have a great bus service that accommodates a lot of people. And if in fact we have to subsidize that to make it work for everybody, that's a part of the quality of life issue that we'd like to pay attention to.
And I'd like to make one correction. The $200 million subsidy.
Andy, you gotta come back.
Make a correction. The $200 million subsidy includes handy van as well, and that's also heavily subsidized. And, you know, for handy van, we've been getting, you know, complaints that, you know, we haven't been responsive enough recently. It's been in the paper, and we're working to address that. And that also requires, you know, staffing costs and system costs. So we're looking to improve responsiveness there. One thing to know about the subsidy as well is that we're really back to, I think if you check the pre-pandemic levels at about $200 million. In fact, it may be a little lower, but it's in that area. We actually dropped way down during the pandemic because a lot of the bus service routes and hours were reduced significantly. And, you know, we're trying to get service back because the feedback from the community is that they want the service.
I think when it comes to the handy van, they need the service, you know. We do have an aging population, and this is one of the things that correlates with it. And that aging population manifests itself in other ways as well, but certainly our handy van and our attention to that, and the 48 new handy vans we bought this year, you know, speaks to that need, so.
Any other questions? Well, this might, maybe more for a comment, you know, the underlying theme for this budget, you know, and the fact that we can also give, relief for homeowners. The underlying assumption is either the economy is gonna continue to grow this year, and things are gonna, I guess, are gonna look positive, right?
That's speculative, but I'm an optimist, okay? I'm an optimist by nature, and I don't think you can run this job and be a pessimist, you know? So, yeah, we're looking at a post-pandemic environment to do anything and everything we can possibly do to help stimulate the economy, and the city has a role in that. Our Office of Economic Revitalization was set up with our administration to help with that specifically, and the things that they're doing. But, you know, we're trying to get people back to work. We're trying to work with businesses, you know, I don't want to go off on any tangents right now, but, you know, as we continue to improve DPP and understand the economic impact of that and so on and so forth, I think one of the things that Andy had mentioned when we talk about this affordable housing, and I think it's reflective in this budget, and is that, you know, Mike Formby, Managing Director, put together our Affordable Housing Working Group, and that comprises about 10 departments in the city. It's something we've been meeting on a year. We co-chair it together, but Mike really drives this. And one of the fundamental things that we needed to do in the beginning was to really, first and foremost, try to understand the city's role in housing. You know, what was our role? And then the other thing we wanted to try to understand was what was getting in the way, what constrained us over the last 50 years. I mean, let's face it, we walked into a housing crisis, exacerbated by the pandemic. But at the end of the day, something's not gone right. And what were those factors? And we really began to break that down. And then the last question we asked ourselves is, what are we going to do about it? And on Tuesday of this week, or maybe it was Wednesday, 2 days ago, Mike, for 2 hours in front of the City Council, presented all the initiatives we have. All of that is stimulus. All of that is stuff that's going to have a real positive impact. So we're looking very much at the city's role in general, but even specifically in driving housing initiatives, what we're trying to do, putting back, you know, when all gets said and done on this rent utility relief program, that we really distinguish ourselves nationally as a city, that's going to circulate about, when it's all said and done, about $300 million back into our economy just on the rent utility relief program. And other things that are going on that we're trying to do. You know, we're trying to get Bill 45. I just was in LA last week talking with major studios. And if we can get Bill 45 done, and what that'll allow us to do to negotiate with major players who want to invest substantially here in building sound stages. And I said the city has been capped at about $400 million. I'm rounding up. Actually, I think the state had $397 million. Oʻahu has $367 billion. I'm sorry. This is $1 billion business. And I really believe that we could do that, but we need the resources. We've actually been turning away business. So I start to see those kinds of things, Rick, and you look at it, you say, you know, there's a lot of stuff we can do, but it is absolutely mandated that we don't perpetuate the status quo in order to make this stuff happen. So that's what we're about. I think our budget, I'm really proud of this budget because, yeah, I know where the numbers come in with respect to inflation and whatever, but this was thoughtful. This was thoughtful from the standpoint of what are our priorities, what is really, quite honestly, our responsibility. And at the end of the day, in this office, now that I've been in it for 26 months, you know, if you're not talking about people, if you're not talking about the housing situation, if you're not talking about public safety, then you shouldn't be here. Okay? And that's what this budget is reflective of. Yeah. Well, that's a great question. Okay, this is a 100-year project, all right, and it's a transformative project for this island, and everybody's talked about that. And it's been long delayed. We're way behind schedule, okay, and we were way over budget. But that housing, and part of what we've done in our initiative with our 100,000 is to be a stimulus on this TOD. You'll start to see that happen. You've got to begin operating it for it to start to manifest itself. And we also got to get further along in there when it becomes the reality. Because I think once we start to come down the Dillingham corridor, you're going to see stuff happen as well. So the rail is sort of the lead on it, Kirsten, and then I think you'll see that TOD start to form because that's actually been done in a lot of other places. The desire to live and work and play along transportation, public transportation system manifests itself once you have that transportation system there. That's just sort of the logic of it all. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, but at the same time, I would tell you, if you go out to Kapolei, and I don't know the last time you've gone out there, and drive through those neighborhoods, the density out there is unlike anything I've seen on Oʻahu before. And so it's not just necessarily about that commute from East Kapolei, because I've said all along, Phase 2 needs to go deeper in there. But there are a lot of people out there. You may not be seeing high-rises. You have more of the urban sprawl out there done in townhouses and single individual homes, but it's massive in housing. So I feel good about that. I think that on our watch, as the timing has worked out, and I've said before, I'm the 4th mayor to touch the rail project. What we've been able to do in this situation, coming into a pandemic and all that we were facing, you know, coming in with respect to the announcements that were made just prior to our taking office, and what we've been able to do, and to bring certainty and get the FTA back to the table as a construction partner. They haven't given the city any money since 2017. Is not insignificant, okay? And on top of that, the reality is here. We're about really to begin operating, which we're going to be announcing at the State of the City. I feel like I should be saying all this stuff to you right now, but I got to hold something back. Otherwise, we're going to have a State of the City, and none of you are going to show up, and I'm going to go, what did I do wrong? Okay? Yes, Mike? Yeah. Well, I was saving it for the state of the city, Michael, but I'll just talk about that. We're doing, okay, because you're here in the moment, and we're talking about our budget. We're doing this regional infrastructure planning, okay? And we're going to invest in that. That's part of that $100 million, and that's starting in West Oʻahu. So we're very cognizant of that. Is there anything else, Mike, I should say to that? I mean, so that is part of our strategy. This $100 million we're putting in on affordable housing for us is part of what I said earlier about the city's role. What's the city's role, and what can we do that's really proactive, that we feel that we need to do specifically, that's strategic, okay? And so that's where we are. Oh, it's on top of the 100 million, okay. March 14th, 11 o'clock in the morning. At, hopefully you'll show up, Ian. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else about that, Mike? Well, my closing comment, again, oh, go ahead, Kristen.
That's about the ambulance service, taking it over, and the state isn't giving us enough money to cover the cost. What's it look like on the legislature side, where you can get some more money?
I want to.
Actually, the funding we get from the state will continue to decline. I think in '24, we're scheduled to receive somewhere between $8 to $10 million. And then from '25 on, we'll receive about $3 to $3.5 million from the state. And that amount will continue until they decide to, repeal that allocation to us. So, the city is going to be responsible for a approximate $50 million budget for, emergency services. And, I'll throw in the water safety officer patrol service with that. And we're going to have to find ways to fund that. And one thing we're going to do is really take a hard look at how we bill and the system we use to bill to ensure that we are capturing the dollars that are available as we provide the service. So, yeah.
Let me give a little historical context to that, because that decision was made shortly after we took office. And that was at a time in the middle of the pandemic when the state was hemorrhaging money and they were looking for some relief. And so the state running the ambulance service at a cost of about $50 million a year was creating about a $20 million a year deficit. And so they put it to us that they really felt that we should take that over. And after a little bit of discussion, we decided, you know what, we could run that better than the state. In fact, quite honestly, the city and county should be running our ambulance services. And we thought we could make it a better business model so it wouldn't be such a financial deficit, at the same time improving services when we looked at it. It needed that kind of attention. I can't say enough about Dr. Jim Island, who's in charge of EMS, but we've also meet on that on a regular basis. So we just said, fine, we'll take it at a time when that was not an easy decision to make, because we were in the same shape financially as far as uncertainty, and we were able to tier the deal. Michael did a really good job of negotiating that to allow us that transition, but I think we're going to be okay on a going forward basis. I think we're going to actually provide a very important service, much better than it's ever been done before. And I think we're working on that as we are right now. Okay? So let me just close, and if there's no further questions, I want to close the way I started off. I'm so proud of Andy Kawano and his team at BFS, but as Andy alluded to the fact, this is a collaborative effort. In that regard, I've got two great men in this room, and Mike Formby and Krishna Jairam, and they're working with our various members of our cabinet. And this is when you come together on something like this is not just done, forgive me for saying it this way, in accounting. This is a collaborative effort of the best of our thinking from the men and women in the various departments and their responsibilities, trying to operate as fiscally responsible as possible, at the same time make it a better future. And be optimistic, if I can say it again.